welcome to the Paul Penzone podcast for episode number 1. So this is going to be an interesting experience getting off the ground. And, when I speak to people close to me or even the wonderful team here today, I say a little concerned, a little nervous. Never been in this hot seat like this. And they're somewhat surprised because they say, well, you've been involved in a lot of news conferences and, you were with Silent Witness for a long time, working with the media. And what's different is I am a passionate man when I'm speaking about a cause. I can see in the reflection these pictures of me in the background. When the focal point is a little bit more me than the issue, it's a new challenge. So I'm excited about this because in life I try to live by, just one belief. But beyond the fact that it should be about service, but everything you do, you really should evaluate the why. Why are you doing it? What is your motivation? And my motivation with this is probably not a lot different than my motivation when I got involved in law enforcement at the age of 21, although I had prepared for it a few years before that. But I remember very vividly that when you interview for a job in law enforcement, they have this, it's an oral interview process, and they'll throw a lot of different questions at you. But one of the questions that I was asked was, why? Why do you want to be in law enforcement? And my answer was pretty simple, and I think it's probably similar to a lot of men and women who choose a career in law enforcement. Because I don't like bullies was my answer. And I said that I believe that anytime there's a person who's potentially in harm's way and there's a bully that wants to harm them, someone has to intervene. Someone has to step between and say, no, it's not going to happen here. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're the strongest, you're the smartest, you're the anything other than you are the one willing to try to make sure that you can protect those who are more vulnerable. And what does that have to do with a podcast? Well, my why is, and I can't even speak from the context that I've listened to or watched podcasts before. It's not an area that I've spent a lot of time studying. But I do believe when you get this privilege, this opportunity to have a weighted voice, as the term they like to use, that we should work harder to lead by example, to inspire solutions, to be more positive in our communications, to be less critical of people while we're still being constructive of issues, that you have a chance to try to bring people together and make the world a better place for the next generation. Because at the end of the day, that is my why. As a father, as a grandfather, I want to make sure that those that I love live in a place where they feel safe and sound, that they have opportunities and they can thrive. And I want the same for your family. So my why on this show is, I guess maybe my why not? Why not take advantage of the fact that this community has been so kind to me and given me the privilege to be in a place where my voice was heard? And whether you agreed with it or not, understand that I tried my best. I did my best to serve everyone in their best interests. And that, quite frankly, is my why not? Why not do this? So episode 1, I think it's important for me to set the tone for who I am. I think a lot of people, because of the privilege I had in public service and an elected official, think they know me. You heard me maybe on a news conference or you met me in passing in some public setting. But it's probably a very short list of those who do. And oftentimes in today's world, and I think that's also my motivation for the show, is we've allowed factors to preset our expectation or our opinion of people that we don't know. I haven't walked in your shoes, you haven't walked in mine. I mean, I don't expect that. I'm not trying to win you over. I'm not trying to convince you of who I am. But you are going to get, a viewpoint that you haven't had before, and I'll give you my viewpoint on issues that you can consider. So where did it all begin for me? I was born in Trenton, New Jersey, and there is a very famous marker there for anybody who's been to New Jersey. That bridge has been around, I think, since the 30s, and it says, Trenton makes the world takes. And it's interesting because anybody who's been in the area knows it, and they'll reference it. And Trenton, which I think New Jersey, I think, was the 3rd state in the Union, been around a long time. But the people of New Jersey are very much, hands in the dirt, work hard. Majority of those that were there were immigrants from different parts of the world. Just so happens I'm of Italian descent, and the area that I lived in Trenton, New Jersey, was called Chambersburg, and it was a little Italy, for lack of a better description. Restaurants, the culture, the businesses. And when they say Trenton makes the world takes, I pulled it up. So I was a young man when I left, although I have a lot of a lot of good things I remember about growing up there. But it was known for pottery and porcelain, sanitary ware like toilets and sinks, wire rope, rubber products, Lennox. If you're familiar with Lennox, which is a very, it's a beautiful piece of china, or I shouldn't say china because I guess that's a term, but very, very popular and very respected. The Roebling Company was responsible for the steel and wire rope. And I actually remember as a young boy, one of the places that we lived, the factory was right across the street. So this house that you're looking at here, and I think it's kind of cool to educate those who haven't been to the East Coast and seen that unless you've saw it in Rocky. That's a row house. And they came in pairs, almost like duplexes, up and downstairs, and often had a basement. But that's my grandparents' home. So initially, grandparents and great grandparents coming from Italy, coming from primarily Sicily, moved into this community, and the familiarity of all Italian immigrants made it a place where you felt it was a home away from home. But just imagine that house right there. When my father actually lived in that house, it was his mother and father's home. There were 6 kids, and I think there was one toilet and one restroom, and probably 2, if not 3 bedrooms. I can't remember what that house had. And that was not just the norm; that was thriving. And I think it sets an attitude for you to just be grateful and to understand the value of family. And I'll speak more of that later. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is because a lot of who I am today is because of where I came from. And I could tell you a lot good about that community, and I could also tell you some things not as appealing about that community. But I have fond memories, and I think that they help define who I wanted to be as a person. So that was the house, and now you're going to see the church. So as a young boy, I went to a school called St. Anthony's, and it was an old Catholic church. And I kid you not when I tell you I learned to tie a tie by probably 2nd grade. And to this day, still can tie it pretty well, although in today's world, we don't see it as frequently. But when you went to that school, there were expectations, and we actually had nuns as teachers. And they were no nonsense. If your behavior was disruptive, they would let you know. And some probably today would describe it as corporal punishment, which is an exaggeration, but they would go around with yardsticks and they would give you a little crack if that was necessary. And I'm not promoting that, but I do want to kind of create some framework around the idea that spaces and places define who we are and how we behave, and having a respect for authority, having a respect for educators, having a respect for your community comes down to having consequences or people calling out behavior that is not okay. And that was kind of the routine. Like I can also tell you that in that little community, there were parks and beautiful things where we experienced stuff. And I remember the first time I used profanity as a young boy. And I don't know if I was 8 years old, which in Trenton, New Jersey, as an Italian is probably kind of a late bloomer. But there were no cell phones. There was no texting. There was no modern technology like we have today. But at the park, when I used profanity, by the time I got home, my parents already knew. And they made it abundantly clear to me that that was not acceptable because I represented the family and there were expectations. And when I behaved in that manner, I was disrespecting my family. So this upbringing taught me lessons in ways that, although like you see behind me this image, which is kind of funny because I look like a cowboy there and I'm nothing of it. As I told you, I grew up in Trenton. But everything that you say, everything that you do, not that we're perfect, reflects on others who either have invested in you or a part of you or are tied to you in some way. And we owe it to those who came before and those who follow to ensure that we behave with character. And that's really the theme of today's show. What is character? And I say that with the understanding that we're all flawed. We are all flawed humans, and we try our best to do right and to be right, but we're going to have our setbacks. And the image there that you'll see, which is me at a church when I was fortunate to be in the office of sheriff and I had a chance to speak in a lot of environments. This to me is the most defining image of where my pillar lies. And my pillars, there will be 3 I'll speak about, but this being the most dominant one. I am a man of faith. I was raised Catholic, and then when I say I'm a man of faith, I recognize the many faiths in our community. and I can have appreciation and respect for everyone in their walk of life. It's not my place to judge. It's my place to embrace that which I believe most in, and that is my upbringing. And when I say I'm a man of faith, it is the religion, the faith itself. It's not always the institution, because the institution is people, and people are flawed. So we oftentimes will cast disparaging statements about a particular religion because the actions of an individual. And I think we're doing a disservice. But my faith is and has always been so powerful in my life that it's my North Star. And whenever I feel like I'm lost on the path, whenever I feel like I'm facing challenges that are bigger than self, I know if I can kind of just get down to that simple place, like, where's my North Star? How do I stay the course? That I will find my way through it. Not the perfect way, but I will get to the other side of it. And I also believe that my faith has taught me the lesson, the golden rule: treat others as you wish to be treated. And if we could all find that place, that North Star, I am confident that our world would be in a better place. Now, often people will want to challenge it and say, well, there are bad people in the world. There are bad things that occur, and hugging everybody and loving everybody isn't going to get us through it. I spent my life in law enforcement. I chased bad guys and bad girls and wanted to make sure they were held accountable for the harm they did to others. So being convicted and what it means to understand the balance of being a person of faith and leading your life in that manner, but also having responsibilities to ensure that you're protecting others, they do go hand in glove. The saying is, don't confuse kindness with weakness. I can be kind every day of the week. That doesn't mean I'm going to be weak when it comes time to face a difficult challenge. So when I speak of my faith, it is when I roll out of bed every day until I put my head on the pillow at night, I try my best to treat everyone as though it is my own family and as strangers interacting with them. What would I want? And for me, even in times when I face criticism or someone's been unkind, if I depersonalize it and fall back to that place, it makes the life a little bit lighter and not as heavy. So that was the first pillar. The second pillar is my family. And it is not, a distant second. They're tied together. So what you see there is we are a blended family. My beautiful wife in the middle, and she is my muse, and definitely, the extension of my North Star, keeps me on track. To my right is Paul. Paul is I say my son because he is. I've been in his life for a long time, but my stepson through my wife. She had one son. We got married, and my biological son is on the far left there. That's Austin and his beautiful bride Jessica, and they have gifted Veronica and I with 2 granddaughters, which is the greatest gift imaginable. But much like my faith that I spoke about, and this is going to be the character issue, it is, what do you want for your family? What are you willing to sacrifice to do for others with the hopes that people will have that same attitude when it comes to your own family? And that goes back to my law enforcement statement. If I want to know that a complete stranger will run between harm in my family to protect them, to make a difference in their lives, to ensure that they're safe, then I should be willing to do the same for a complete stranger. And you do it without expectation of any reward or recognition, but there have to be those, peacemakers in the world in order for us to have peace and be able to celebrate our faith and our family. So a lot of what I'll talk about on this podcast going forward will involve public safety. It will involve our law enforcement officials, and it will be a lot of praise and recognition for the challenges that they face. And at times there may be some constructive, evaluation of circumstances on how we can do it better. The podcast is not going to be all policing, but it will be safety. It will be that issue, and there'll be other elements on how to collectively build a better community for all of us. So the family is big for me. I'm very, very fortunate and blessed because our boys are sound men. They are respectful. They are kind. They work hard. Paulie works at ASU, and he's the talented guy in music and in video and the stylish one. Austin is the firefighter who runs through the door and will save whomever in whatever situation. And Veronica and I are very proud of them, and that makes my life a lot easier because when I go out in the world, I know that our next generation is going to make a difference in the way that Veronica and I have tried to lead by example. And the third pillar for me is how I got here. It's service. And that is actually the first picture taken when I was sworn in as sheriff in January of 2017. And it's a proud moment for me, but not a singular moment. It was a compilation of a lot of things that brought me to that place. But the idea that if you're in law enforcement and you are fortunate enough to be seated at the head table to be responsible for an organization is the greatest privilege imaginable. But by no means was about me. It was about how do I ensure that I respect all those who work within the organization, the profession, because every word that I shared, everything that I did reflected on their sacrifice, and they were the ones doing the tough work. Now, if you talk to people from the organization, there are some that liked me, some that didn't, some that agreed, some that disagreed. That's human nature. That's life. I wasn't there to try to please everyone. I was there to try to be the gatekeeper of the mission and of the oath of office, and to inspire everybody there to be their best self, and at times when they weren't, to make sure that the accountability was consistent. But service goes back to the bully. It goes back to putting the needs of others before yourself. So what made me decide to run for sheriff? I had a very, very, I'll use the term as I always do, blessed career in law enforcement. I spent over 2 decades with the Phoenix Police Department, worked in a lot of capacities. I worked the streets. I was a training officer. I had done some administrative work. I worked in narcotics, both in the state and federal level, with Phoenix PD as well as with DEA and a task force. And I finished my career running Silent Witness, which is a task force in of itself, trying to solve unsolved cases. And then I retired, and I went to work for an organization called Child Help that cares for child victims of crimes. And I did that because I had been so fortunate in my career that I wanted to do something and give back. I wanted to take my experience and find a way to protect children. And I want to set this marker because it's important. You don't have to receive it any way other than me saying it, but it's important that I clear things up so that you hear my words. I had nothing to do with politics before I ran for political office. I was a public safety professional, and I believe firmly then and now that there is no place for politics in policing. So I was at home, and I have to give a little bit of a setup for this. I'm taping this in the same week where my predecessor, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, is going to celebrate his 94th birthday. And I don't care how you feel about him. Some love him, some didn't. Just kind of the same way you feel about me. But I'm going to wish him a happy birthday because the sheriff and I, and he would be mad if I said sheriff because he prefers I call him Joe, we have a unique friendship. And I'd be willing to bet people listening right now are either offended, surprised, and I don't care. I don't care how you interpret or how you feel about it, because in life, especially as a man of faith, surround yourself with like-minded people who all cheer you on and are your biggest fans and agree with everything you say. You challenge yourself to have relationships with people who see things differently and feel differently and maybe haven't even been kind to you at times. But if you can get past that because you can find a common ground, the friendship can be unique. And Joe and I have a unique friendship. We talk with some frequency. He invited me to his birthday party. I won't be able to attend, unfortunately, because I'll be out of state. But our relationship evolved over time. And we are very different. There are things that he did I absolutely disagreed with, and that was my pursuit for office. And there are things that I did that he probably disagrees with. But it didn't hinder our ability to find a common ground and just enjoy each other as people. And that's where we are now. Back up to 2016, that's not where we were. I was at home, and TV was on the wall, and I'm just kind of passively paying attention. My wife's making dinner, and there's Sheriff Joe, and he's doing a news conference. And in his news conference, one of the things that I felt from my perspective was bothersome was leaders should always focus on those doing the job, not on yourself. You should always promote the exceptional work of those doing the job, not lead with bravado. And his news conference just kind of rubbed me wrong. And it was my opinion. You may feel differently, and that's what we're entitled to. But I had expressed outwardly, I said, why does he do that? I'm so tired of this. And this voice, and some of you have heard the story, this voice said, if you don't like it, do something about it. It was a powerful voice from above, beyond. Actually, it was from behind me. It was my wife. She heard me complaining, and she said, if you don't like it, do something about it. And it's such a defining moment because for all of us in life, we see a challenge and either one, we'll go after it, or two, we'll talk ourselves out of it. We'll say it's bigger than self. There's no way I could be sheriff. There's no way I could be whatever's on your heart. But the truth is, at the end of the day, the only barrier between you and that destination is your mind. Are you going to talk yourself into it or out of it? Doesn't mean you'll always be successful, but the pursuit is as big as the accomplishment. So when she said that to me, it was this moment where, wow, my wife just challenged me. She just called me out. And that's who she is. She, I'm from Trenton. She's from the Bronx. So we'll argue all day, which town's tougher. But she was making it abundantly clear what she expected of me. Do something or shut up. Don't complain about something you're not willing to take on yourself. So I evaluated it. And I'm like, that's interesting. Would I want to be sheriff? Would I want to make the sacrifice necessary to go through that exercise to become sheriff? But the most important question, or kind of two questions, are why and are you capable of doing the job? Because getting it is a hell of a lot different than doing it right. And don't pursue something that you're not equipped to do for the betterment of others. So I challenged myself to go through that exercise and decided, yeah, I'm going to go for this, but I'm going to do it with the intention to represent law enforcement leadership in the way that I believe is more selfless. And another attribute of character is with humility. That's one of those terms that is often misunderstood, because humility can also be confused with some type of a weakness. But truthfully, it's probably the greatest attribute for strength, because when you're so convicted and confident in who you are and what you do, you can be humble about it. You don't need to bark every time to get someone's attention. You have the privilege of authority to do things just because of the mere title. So if you're going to be in leadership and you're going to be a boss, you don't need to raise your voice or talk down to anyone. You can treat everybody with respect, but you have the authority to make sure things get done the way they should. And if someone disobeys those directives, then you have the authority to address it. So there I was on the path to politics for the first time and didn't know what to expect. So I'm running for office. Actually, I take it back. I'm not even running for office yet. I have to talk to some people to figure it out. I don't even know how to. And I took some meetings, and I was an independent. I was not attached or affiliated to either party. But I couldn't run as a Republican because Joe was a Republican and the party was going to have no part of challenging him in any way. So I had to make a decision. If I ran as a Democrat, what would that look like? And I met with the party because they had heard I was interested. And we had several meetings. And I committed to a couple things if I was going to run as a Democrat. I would never get involved in any legislation outside of law enforcement. And I would never endorse a candidate, period, while I was in office. Seems pretty extreme. But I've had a conviction about it. If I'm going to take politics out of policing so that I could be a trusted leader for everybody that I serve, how could I go out and endorse somebody for office because now I'm saying that particular policy that is not tied to law enforcement or that particular person who is attached to a party better represents a community's needs, and the office that I'm pursuing has great influence. So I just didn't feel that was appropriate. And I'd like to say that I stayed true to it through my entire tenure. And people who want to challenge your question, or because I've been called a lot of things. Sometimes they were true, more often they weren't. But I was not affiliated in a manner of politics where it drove my decisions. I was in conflict with the Republican Party at times, the Democrat Party at times, everybody at times. But I was never conflicted with my role in law enforcement as a leader. So that was put my feet in the ground. That was okay. I'm going to go do this, and here's how I'm going to do it. And I talked about Joe earlier, and I'm going to bring him up, maybe once more, maybe twice more. But I felt it was appropriate when I ran against him, and actually, this was in 2016 when I was successful, to tell him first. So character for me is, and actually I pulled up the definition on it, because I think it's important to kind of reflect on it. And first of all, I believe that character never wavers. But it says here the pillars of character are integrity is number one. Aligning your actions with the deepest values, even when it is difficult or inconvenient. So when I went and talked to Joe and I said, hey, I just want you to hear from me first that I'm running for office against you. And I believe that it's time for succession. I believe it's time to see different leadership. And Joe was a passionate guy, and he felt differently. He said, no, I'm the sheriff, and I'm going to stick around for a while. And I had said, wouldn't it be nice if as law enforcement leaders we took a different tone, though? What if we just talked about law enforcement issues and were respectful to each other in a way that set an example for others? because we're pursuing elected office. You are in office, I'm pursuing it. And not in a mean way or a hurtful way. His response to me was, Paul, you're naive. That's not politics. And it was as though he was trying to educate me. And again, I think he was sincere when he was saying he was not disrespectful to me in that room. We have a different dynamic. And my response was, I disagree with you, Sheriff, because politics doesn't define us, we define it. That's one of my biggest concerns and one of my biggest motivations for this podcast. We have, as a society, chosen to make excuses for behavior that we know is in conflict with true character. Whether we say, well, that's politics, or that was the circumstances, or they did this, therefore we can do that. Those are all excuses to stray from the North Star of just being a person of integrity. Integrity doesn't mean you're always going to end up on the positive side of the ledger. Sometimes it means a sacrifice to say my integrity means more to me than the benefit. But when we all come to, the winter season of our lives, and we look back, I don't care how much money you made, what titles you had, I don't care about any of those elements. You will look at yourself in the mirror and say, was I true to my own character? Or did I sacrifice it for some materialistic thing to the detriment of another just because it put me in a better position? And I think that would be the saddest place to be, because that's all you take with you when you go is your legacy. And your legacy doesn't have to be some public thing that everybody knows about. It just has to be something that you made your mark in a way that was for the better of others, for your family and your faith, and that in your service, you were willing to sacrifice. But we're not that, in many ways, we're not that society anymore. In many ways, we say things like, well, in politics, it's okay because it's for a greater good. So if I do something wrong or bad now, but it turns out to work out for good in the end, then it's justifiable. You can still make the sacrifice and do it the right way and get to that same destination if you're willing to do what's necessary. So I dove into politics, not knowing what the heck I was doing. And it was brutal. But it was the price for admission. If you want to have the privilege of being sheriff, it shouldn't be an easy path. It should be a path where you are tested like metal in the fire and either toughened by it or broken by it. And I would tell you in a very raw and transparent way, I would go home every night with a rosary, Catholic rosary, and I would go out back and I would pray the rosary. And I'm not trying to impose my faith on you. Some of you're like, why is he getting so deep? That's who I am. Okay, so I'm just going to share it. But I would pray the rosary for strength, not for, hey, make me sheriff, Lord. It was, I got through this day and survived, and it was pretty brutal. Give me the strength to refill my tank for tomorrow. And it would give me peace, and I'd go back out the next day. So I've shared this story before, too, in public, but it's important that I talk about it. When you're running for office, you think it's all about you, and it's not. And you're out there, and people that are complete strangers will do things for you, whether it's putting a sign on the ground or knocking on a door or whatever. And they're amazing. They are the meat and potatoes of making a difference in the community when it comes to politics and elected office. But it was like 157 degrees in Arizona, and I was just melting. And I was out there knocking on doors and doing stuff with complete strangers supporting me. And I asked the question in my head, I'm like, why am I doing this? This is ridiculous. This is not worth it. The juice is not worth the squeeze on this. And a little lady came up to me at one point. Didn't know her, and she happened to be Latina, and she was probably in her 70s, and she says, can I give you a hug? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm Italian. We'll hug anybody. This is great. So I give her a hug, but it didn't really click with me at first. And she says, thank you. I thank you for doing this. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact conversation, but I just remember the impact it had on me. In that moment, I realized, and some of you out there are going to judge, and I don't, again, that's your prerogative, but know this, I am unwavering when it comes to we treat everyone with respect. And if you have bias in your heart, or you are racist or hate-filled in any way and want to do harm to somebody because they look different, believe different, whatever it is, shame on you. She was Latina, and she was living during a time in our community where, because of the color of her skin, she could very likely be targeted in a way that was inconsistent with the manner others were treated by law enforcement. So she rolled out of bed every day scared. And all she wanted was someone who was going to treat her equally with respect. So when she was thanking me, it was because she had hoped to live in a space, in a place where the United States' truest values were respect for everyone. It has nothing to do with immigration. It has nothing to do with your position on enforcing the laws, because I'm a law enforcer, and I believe in our immigration laws as much as anything else. That has nothing to do with this topic or this lady. The color of her skin was causing her to be treated differently. And what the epiphany was for me was, this isn't about me. No matter how hard my worst day is, I'm not rolling out of bed being targeted because of the color of my skin like she is. So if I'm going to be sheriff, it's to ensure that the law is lawful and ethical, and that we lead with integrity and we're not biased, and that we understand we're caretakers of the authority and we are not it's not an entitlement, it's a privilege. And that starts at the top of any office. So that really set the tone for me going forward. So I was fortunate enough to be elected, and it was incredible. You saw the image earlier where I was proud as I could possibly be. And it was an interesting time, because you will look in the mirror and say, okay, it's game on. But I had been a cop for, I think, 3 days. Excuse me, I had been sheriff for 3 days. And I remember this. One of the guys in the agency had come to pick me up in the morning. It's 7:30. I walk out my front door, cup of coffee in hand. I get to the car, and he says, "Hey, Sheriff, you need to hear this." And he turns up the police radio. And I can hear the traffic, and I'm still not clear. I just know that we have a deputy in pursuit. I said, "What's going on?" Well, out in, I can't remember if it was, Gila Bend area where it was. It was somewhere in the outskirts of the county in a random area at a truck stop. Someone had called in and said, "Hey, there's a naked lady in the parking lot running around and she needs help. Something's wrong. She's drugs, alcohol, mental illness. I don't know." So a deputy had gone out there with the best of intentions. I mean, he was going to try to be helpful, and he pulls up in his marked vehicle, and he gets out and he goes to the trunk and he takes out a blanket because he wants to wrap her in the blanket, because here she is naked, exposed out in the community. He wants to figure out what's going on. So as he pops the trunk to get the blanket, she runs around and jumps in the driver's seat, and she takes off in his squad car. Quite the introduction back to law enforcement, right? As the sheriff. This is going to be one of the first big ones I'm going to have to deal with in the news is, why is a naked lady driving 100 miles an hour down the freeway in a Maricopa County Sheriff's Office vehicle? Well, the deputy in this tough spot is like, oh, this is not good. And he flags down a couple, I think it was in a pickup truck, and commandeers their truck. So he is now chasing this lady in this car, in this truck with this couple at high speeds to recover the vehicle. And I'm just thinking to myself, there are no boring days in law enforcement. This is what you signed up for, so you're going to have to figure out how to enjoy the ride and manage the moment. Fortunately, she was detained. Everybody was safe. We called the truck off in the pursuit, and were able to get the vehicle back. But the thing about law enforcement is you just don't know what to expect every day, and it's not easy. So when I was sheriff, it was extremely important to me that everyone I interacted with, that I reflected the difficulties, the good, the bad, and the ugly of the organization in a way that if anybody heard my words or interacted with me, they could have an opinion of me, but I was not going to do something that was going to be detrimental to the opinion of the men and women who put the uniforms on, the detention officers, the deputies, the civilian employees, because they were the ones making the sacrifice, and I was privileged to be in the post to represent their sacrifice. So we got some pictures I want to share with you, and they're really important to me because they reflect different things. So let's throw one of them up there, Rob. Whatever we got next. Okay, this is my favorite. And he's got to leave it up for a little bit for you because I need you to focus in. So I'm in the middle there, and you can see I'm wearing like a gray shirt, not in uniform, and it's by design. And on both sides of me, you see some adults, and those are teachers at one of the schools here in the community. And then you see a lot of young students around. So society is judged by how we treat the most vulnerable, and that is the youngest and the elderly. And as a leader in the community, as an adult, as a parent, as a teacher, as a doctor, as a nurse, as a producer in a podcast studio, we will all have a moment to lead. And if we're not leading the children in the right direction, ensuring they feel safe, then we're failing. So I was asked to go to this school, and the majority of the students there were minority children. And the reason I was asked to go speak at the school is because the teachers felt like having a chance to interact with a law enforcement professional in a very human way would be beneficial, so that they would not have a negative opinion if it was being fed to them, whether through, as they grew up in their community in a tough part of town. So I went there, and I didn't want to be in uniform because I wanted to just interact with them before I even introduced myself as sheriff and pass my badge around. And then we had the deputies come in with their uniforms and things like that. So they're young. Their attention span wasn't that great. I had 15, 20 minutes of their attention, and they just wanted to play and talk. So at the conclusion of it, we had stickers, little junior deputy stickers. And I want you to look, and then we'll come back to this picture, but if you look at the little girl, her head's on my leg, and in her left hand, she's holding a sticker. So we had passed stickers out to all the children, and then the teacher said, "Hey, can we take a picture?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I get there, and it's funny because instead of letting the kids get next to me, all the teachers were excited like they were children, and they got in the middle of the shot. And I looked over and I saw this little girl, and she was probably 10 or 15 feet away, and her eyes were welling up with tears, and her lip was quivering. And I said, "Honey, what's wrong? Are you okay?" And first she kind of disregarded me, and I said it again to get her attention. I said, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" And I went over in her direction. And she said in the softest, most vulnerable and cracking voice, "I didn't get a sticker." So she had not, it's not that we ran out, she had just been overlooked. For some reason, everybody got one but her. And it was breaking her heart to think that all of her friends got these junior deputy stickers and she didn't get one. So I said, "Honey, here, I have one for you." I handed her a sticker and I said, "I want you to come sit with me in this picture." So she comes, sits next to me there, and you can see exactly, the picture tells 1,000 words. She lays her head on my leg, staring at the sticker as if it might as well have been a gold bar from Fort Knox. All she wanted was to feel safe, to feel loved, and to feel valued, that she was deserving, no different than any of her friends, to get one of those stickers, those junior deputy stickers. That moment is not singular to me. There are men and women in uniform in all agencies all over the nation every day doing gestures exactly like that to ensure that the children in our community understand that men and women in uniform are role models, whether they choose to or not, that they are there to protect you and that they care about you, that they have children of their own. And there may be bad times, there may be bad moments, but make no mistake about it. No one goes into law enforcement thinking, "I don't care about children." So to have the opportunity as the sheriff to be in that moment, to recognize that little girl and do something that hopefully changed the way she felt about herself and her heart there because she was not ignored or neglected, is probably the picture that stays with me the most. And there's a lot of images you'll see over time, but that one to me really stood out. So I talked about the youth. I want to talk about the elderly. Integrity is one of the attributes I talked about when it comes to character. The other one is empathy and caring. And it says recognizing the feelings of others and acting with genuine kindness or compassion. That seat next to me, that's at a parade, and I saw this nice lady, and I'm not sure what initiated our engagement, but no doubt about it, I'm thankful when I look at this picture that I am looking straight into her eyes and giving her my undivided attention and making sure that I am in the moment. Because she has lived a life. She came before. She has done things that were a part of building our nation in some way, whatever it is. And it is so important, not just for me as the sheriff, but for all of us, to recognize the seniors in our community and to meet them where they are and to ensure that they still feel valued. That just because they're at a season of their life where they're not as mobile, they're not as active, they're not as visible in society, they are no less important or valuable and as deserving as everyone to have our undivided attention. They need to be cared for and protected. They need to be loved. We need to find ways to ensure that we're giving them quality of life. And if you want to make it selfish, make it selfish. I'm not far off. I'm not a young man of being in that seat, nor are any of you. None of us, get out unscathed, right? We're all on that same evolution of the seasons. So if you want someone to look and care about you when you're at that stage, you darn well better lead by example now, because that's what character is about. Character is about making sure that you respect everybody where they are. I had a practice that I tried to stay true to, which is when we had recruits in the academy, I never scheduled and formalized a meeting with the academy classes. And it wasn't just deputies, it was all different agencies. But I should say always, because always and never two terrible words to use. I tried to prioritize paying each class a visit. And I would do it impulsively. I would not tell even the instructor I was coming in. And that was because I didn't want them to be prepared. I wanted them to have anxiety, like, oh, the sheriff's going to be here. What do we do? How do we act? I wanted to see them just in a natural moment where I walk in and I'm like, hey, how you doing? I'm Paul Penzone. I happen to be the sheriff. Thank you for choosing this profession and this career. And then I would talk to them for a little bit, trying to set an example, and then I would do a Q&A because what they were concerned about was far more important than what I had to talk about. So one of the things that I always expressed was, thank you for choosing a job to be extraordinary. You are extraordinary. You're doing something that most aren't willing to, a lot aren't capable, and even more aren't deserving, meaning that you haven't met the threshold of character. You haven't lived a life that justifies the right for you to have a gun and a badge to enforce our laws. So it is a select few that can, and even smaller few that will. And then I would talk to them about respect, because I'm a firm believer in this element. Respect is not something that you get. I hear, like, I'll use professional athletes as the example. Well, I need to get my respect. I need to get my contract. They don't respect me. Respect isn't something you get. Respect is something you give. Respect is something you see in the mirror when you look there and you say, do I have self-respect? Am I going to live a life where, regardless of who I'm interacting with, what they've done, what they stand for, it has nothing to do with who I am and what I believe in. Therefore, I will act respectful regardless of who they are, what they do. Because if you choose not to, you stoop to their level. And it's interesting because just recently, so this is a great picture. This is another parade. It's not like all I did was parades, but this is another parade. And I liked, more often than not, you'll see me some pictures on a horse, but I like to walk the parade route because it gave me a chance to interact with people. And to see somebody on the side who wants to engage you, to go over and extend a handshake and connect in that manner, is the most underrated and powerful thing that we can do as humans. Because I know that Dave Pratt posted something recently, the power of a handshake. And if you don't understand the power of a handshake, let me give you this scenario. Suppose you go up and you extend your hand to shake someone else's and they deny you. How do you feel in that moment for something as simple as someone refusing to shake your hand? Take the opposite. Take it to the other extreme of the spectrum, and that's what the value of a handshake is. Because being denied one is sure insulting and embarrassing, but accepting and giving one is a powerful gesture, and what is extended in that handshake is your character. What is your word? What is your worth? What is your commitment? Who are you as a person? I'm extending my hand to you in a way that says that I respect you because I believe in self-respect and giving it. So I always liked that picture because I felt like I was really connecting with that gentleman. And it may have been a brief moment. And I'm wearing this Fiesta Bowl jersey. It's got my name on the back, and that's all well and good, and that's cool, right? But I promise you, for that gentleman, all he knows is he has an opportunity to shake the hand of a law enforcement professional, and more specifically a sheriff, whether your name's on the back or not. Because saying in sports, the name on the back means a heck of a lot less than, the sticker on the helmet. I am representing the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office and all the men and women who sacrifice. So when I interact with that person, I want him to see them through my interaction. So when I would speak with the candidates or the recruits, I would tell them, I don't care who you come across. If it is, here in the Valley, people can relate to this. If it's someone who lives in the Biltmore and Paradise Valley who has great net worth, or if it's someone who lives in an alley and is struggling to get by, the person in Paradise Valley knows they got it good. You don't need to tell them how great they are. Just be respectful. The person who lives in the alley, they got it pretty bad. And if you act respectful to them, who knows what it will lead to in the course of their day. They probably saw a crime. They have the eyes of they're the eyes of the entire community. They may share with you, hey, you know what? I saw something happen. They may reconsider a bad decision because a complete stranger in uniform was kind to them and gave them self-worth. So I would tell the recruits, live a life leading with respect. And just recently, not too long ago, there's a law enforcement professional who's known across the nation, and I've met him in passing a few times, and I have the utmost respect for him. I'm not going to name him. But he made a statement to the extent of, why do we expect our law enforcement professionals to be respectful when no one is respectful to them? Or very few are. And I understand why he said it, but I completely disagree. We cannot win over people, and you may not even win them over, but you can't change the attitude, or at least challenge the attitude of people who are disrespectful to authority, and specifically law enforcement, when we behave in a way that justifies their attitude about us. If you can't win them over, win 10 other people, and they're going to be the minority in that group who recognize that law enforcement professionals are the highest standard and quality of character in our nation. So that was the message I tried to pass to the recruits. And I would give an example, and I was just talking to Robin earlier, who's incredible here. She's the studio director, and she's making sure I don't mess up this podcast. But we were talking about this, and I said, here's the example I'd like to share. You feel good about yourself. You got the gun and the badge on, and you're in the uniform, and you're looking good, and you worked hard, and you're deserving of recognition of the public that you're doing a tough job. And you're feeling like, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. Don't ever feel so good about yourself that you diminish who other people are, what they contribute to the world. Because if you think you're more important than a mechanic, go out to your squad car and it's got, the fuel pump's out, the tires are flat, whatever it is. And suddenly that mechanic's the most important person in your life because you can't hit the street until they fix the car. I can't do this podcast if Robin's not over here doing what she does, and Rob and Billy and everybody. So my name's up there and it looks pretty cool. But I'm nothing if not for the people around me. And that's what I wanted law enforcement rookies to understand. Humility, the most powerful attribute of anything that relates to character. Now, the other thing I would tell them, and I try to live by this credo, and I'll share it with you. It's so important to choose what you want to do for a living. Who you choose to live your life with, what career you choose to do for a living. Your joy, your experience, your purpose are all tied into that, and it's extremely important decisions. But there's one decision that exceeds it by a long shot. Who do you want to be for a lifetime? Every and any profession, who do you want to be? Do you want to be a person who makes things better for others, yet stays convicted to your own principles in a respectful way? Or do you want to have the privilege of something really cool like being sheriff, but then to act like a buffoon? Tried my best to not be a buffoon. Some of you may feel I was. That's your prerogative. But I assure you of this. Every day I spent in that office, I have gratitude for, because it was a privilege. And when I chose to leave, I left on my terms because I did not want to stay so long that it defined me versus being defined by my family, my faith, my friends, and my commitment to service on the good days and the bad. So that was always really important to me. I had a moment, I'll share this last one, and then I think I'm going to wrap with some elements that I wanted to close on. I had been elected sheriff, and I can't remember exactly when the Chinese New Year is. I know it's in the beginning of the year, January, February. But at this stage in my tenure, I was rolling solo a lot. And I was at the Chinese New Year celebration at the Great Wall off of, I think it's like 35th Avenue, Bethany Home Road, that area, Camelback maybe. And it was a wonderful event. There were hundreds of people in there celebrating, and I'm wandering through, and I bump into this young man. He's probably 18 or 19 years old. One of my favorite stories to share. And when I bumped into him, I was kind of in a daze because I'm walking in this room and everybody's looking at me. Now, being an Italian from New Jersey, somebody's looking at you like, hey, you got a problem? What are you looking at, right? I was a little bit confused because I didn't realize the gravity of the office at that moment. It was early on, right? But everybody was looking at me because I was the guy who beat the guy. Joe was a legend in this town, whether you liked him or you didn't. He was a legend. And I was the guy, right? Not because Paul Penzone, just so happened somebody came along and took over the pride. So with all the eyes on me, I was kind of caught up in it, and I bump into this young man and almost knock him over. I catch him, kind of dust him off, and I say, you know what, I apologize. I wasn't paying attention. Forgive me. Are you okay? He says, yeah, I'm okay. There is nothing exceptional about that. That's just being, a decent human being. Something I was, raised to do. A few days later, one of the guys in the office who worked in the public information says, hey, Sheriff, I'm going to show you something. And he brings over his computer and he pulls up this image. And the image is that young man sitting in a chair. He's got his phone. He's taking a selfie with me in the background. And in it, so what he had done is he posted this. I guess I don't know anything about technology. He did some kind of a hashtag or something so that it was shared with us. And he said, isn't it cool that the new sheriff bumped into me but was polite enough to apologize? it was such an epiphany moment for me, because that, when I spoke about the handshake and I spoke about the gestures and all the other things, that moment taught me the lesson that everywhere I went and everything that I did, that there would be eyes on me. And I didn't have to be perfect, but I sure as heck better be the best version of myself, out of respect to the office, respect to the men and women, and respect to the community who gave me the privilege, whether you voted for me or not. That young man, that little gesture, because a sheriff took a moment to apologize for something as simple as bumping into him, mattered. And I wanted the recruits to understand that, because everywhere they went, when you are in uniform, you represent something greater than self. Not just by your actions when you're saving a life or running towards gunfire or whatever you do. That's really important and hard. But you will be judged by the way you treat somebody in a coffee shop when you're just hanging out with a colleague and you're aloof in some way and you send the wrong message to somebody who suddenly says, cops are all bad. They're so arrogant. They think that their, power is theirs. You may not even mean it. You may be having a bad day. You have your own challenges in your life. But when you put the uniform on and you go to work, you have to have that recognition, because there are a lot of men and women who make incredible sacrifices. And during my tenure with Phoenix PD of 20 years, I believe 21 officers died in the line of duty. My tenure as sheriff, two deputies and two detention officers died during the course of duty. That's not counting, we'd others due to COVID, but actions during the course of duty. And everybody who puts on the uniform needs to understand we have a debt to pay. And the debt is to ensure that their loss is not in vain, that their memory is never tarnished because of our actions, and that we care so deeply about our colleagues that we will always respect the community who has empowered us with the privilege of enforcing the laws of a free nation, because there's an absolute balance between freedom and order. We are not a completely free nation because we sacrifice some freedoms to have order, and we don't let order outweigh the value of freedom. But law enforcement is part of the scales. It is, I'm going to say this and it makes people mad, it may be the most critical profession as it relates to ensuring that this free nation continues to thrive, because we have order and we have consequences to those who violate what we deem to be appropriate and lawful behavior in our nation. So we need to support those professionals. We need to make sure they're trained and equipped. We need to hold them accountable. We also need to make sure that those who lead the masses aren't leading with their own selfish intentions, that they are the ones with the greatest humility and integrity of all. And I think that applies to a lot of other walks of life. So don't get offended that I chose the profession I came from to be so, convicted when I express that, because there's a lot of all important professions. All professions are important. We all serve a greater purpose as long as we're being selfless in our effort to serve that purpose. So I'm going to end with two images that hopefully you can appreciate. Rob, you got the first one for me? So actually I got more than two, but so again, take a good look at this. We had a program in the sheriff's office called Mosaic. Mosaic is a drug recovery program. And what we would do is we had two pods, one for the ladies and one for the men. And we would select inmates with the highest probability of success in a recovery program, and they'd get a chance to live in that pod. And it was like a dorm. It was very communal, and they had some privileges as it related to TV and other things like that. But they went through recovery treatment. And we would align it with their date of release from the jail. And if you don't believe that helping to reduce recidivism and helping people rehabilitate is the right thing to do when they're incarcerated, know this: the cost of incarceration is extreme. It's like $350, $375 the first day you book somebody, and like $175 every day thereafter. That's a heck of a lot more money than we spend to educate our children. So what you see in this picture are the ladies who were in the Mosaic program, and their graduation from the program aligns with their release out of the jail system. And then we would connect them with a program outside the jail to help them continue with their recovery. So if you look top right, you got a lady up top wearing the stripes, and just below you got another beautiful lady there throwing some peace signs at you. Black t-shirt. Everybody in a black t-shirt, That's my wife's team, her salon. That's my wife up top of the stairs throwing the peace signs. She came to me and she said, she knew about the Mosaic program. She said, what if we go in and we do makeovers? What if we do the ladies' hair for them before graduation? I think that'd be a nice gift. Well, I would tell everyone I might have been the sheriff in the office, but when I got home, my wife is definitely the boss. And that's a good way to live. It keeps you out of trouble. So when she says she wants to do something like this, you make it happen. And we made sure that we had protocols and everything. But what I also made sure of is that nobody knew that didn't already know that that was my wife and her team. It was just a team of hairstylists coming in to do makeovers to reward the ladies. And I will tell you, the women in that program were as excited about getting their hair done as they were holding up a certificate of completion for getting through the Mosaic program and changing the trajectory of their lives by addressing their addiction. It was a gentle, kind, thoughtful gift to give someone self-esteem in an environment where they have all the reasons in the world to feel very little about themselves. That's who my wife is. She's the most philanthropic, thoughtful person that sees everyone where they are for who they are in a way that I want to make a difference in their lives. If I had any success in the sheriff's office and stayed on course with my North Star, it was because of my wife and her holding me accountable. She was tough on me at times. She saw things that she felt I could do better. She made sure I did. And it was kind of funny because she would be doing the hair of those young ladies and she'd make small talk with them. And every once in a while she'd be like, so what do you think of this new sheriff? What's this guy like? Because they didn't know it was my wife. And she'd come back and let me know what the feedback was. And it wasn't as though I was looking to be liked or not liked, but I was looking to ensure that everybody was treated with respect. But she thought that was pretty funny, and I do too. I'll share one more story about her before we go to the next image. Hold on, back up one for me. My wife didn't come to headquarters often. She had her own stuff to take care of, and she was not all that enamored by the fact I was sheriff. But she happened to be at the office one day, and she'd parked out front, and she'd come in through the lobby and up to visit with me, and she was leaving. And as she was going out of the lobby, there happened to be a lady in the lobby at the time talking with the officers there. And my wife exits, and the lady chases her out the door. The deputies see this on the cameras, and they get panicked, so they run out there to make sure my wife's okay. Well, the lady wasn't accosting my wife. She recognized that she was my wife, that she was the sheriff's wife. And she wanted to talk to my wife because she had a son incarcerated in our jail system. And she was trying to get him a Bible. And because of some policies and safety procedures, it's not that you can't get a Bible in jail, you can, but there's a certain process to make sure that they come through the right way so that we can ensure there's nothing bad about it. No harm can be done with whatever's being sent to the inmates. But she talks to my wife and she expresses, she's like, I just want to get a Bible to my son. So my wife tells me when I get home that day, this is his name. This is where he's in your jail system. You will get him a Bible. And we did. Not for preferential treatment, but if you're in a position of power like that, and a person in jail has an opportunity to connect with their faith, whatever it could be, and their faith is rooted in love, and it might be a pathway for them to better themselves when they leave, why the hell wouldn't I? Why wouldn't we do something to ensure that we're helping people help themselves so they don't come back to jail, to save not only you the taxpayer dollars, but to make them a better person so that we can find a way to address the issue of crime in our community. So you got a preview on the next picture. This is the other extreme. Yeah, I mean, one context we're taking care of the inmate population, and I talked about handshakes. And I don't recall exactly what this was, why a lot of our team was mobilized, but through the course of my tenure there, the 2 terms, they've been mobilized several times, and they made sacrifices well beyond the regular schedule of work. I look at that list right there. I don't know if they're Republican, Democrat. I don't know if they're pro-Sheriff Penzone, anti-Sheriff Penzone. I don't know anything about them other than they're wearing the uniform with the patch and they're sacrificing every day, and I don't care about those elements. I do care that while they were there, that I took the time to shake their hand to just say thank you. And if you went and interviewed him, I don't know. A couple would say, oh, he was okay. A couple would say he was the worst sheriff ever. And the other ones were like, hey, I just want a job. I just want to come do my work and be left alone. And I will respect all 3 of them if you are respecting the authority of the patch and the badge that you wear. I was asked, hey, do you have our backs? What does that mean? I know what it means fundamentally. But having somebody's back doesn't mean making excuses or covering up something that's bad or defending actions that are not defensible. It means ensuring that everyone is respected and that there's consistency in the manner that you lead that organization when it comes to addressing the good, the bad, and the ugly in the organization. So my job was to be the leader who understood the responsibility as the standard bearer in the organization. Not always perfect, not always right, but striving to be deserving of that privilege. A lot of meat on the bone today. Flew solo. I'll have guests down the road. We will talk about a lot of topics. We'll talk about safety. We'll talk about health. We'll talk about real-time issues. We will talk about them in a thoughtful, positive, inspiring way. Before we go to the last image, I'm going to point to the ones behind me here. You got me on a horse a couple times. As I said, I'm not a cowboy, but it was pretty darn cool to be able to jump on a horse as the sheriff of Maricopa County and represent this community in the way that you gave me the privilege. So I am grateful. Whether you voted for me or not, whether you like me or not, thank you for allowing me that privilege, and that privilege has led me to this place. So for the last photo comes up, I'm going to give some shout-outs, and I mentioned a few. First one goes to Dave Pratt. Dave Pratt Podcast. I'm here because of Dave. He is a good man and incredible at what he does. And we've met a few times, and he said, Paul, I think that if you did a podcast, there might be some things that you can share with people that'll be beneficial, and I think you should consider it. And that's why I'm here. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm going to try to not disappoint him because he believes in me. And then the team, we got Rob back there is the executive producer who's kind of mentoring me through this. Issa, she's the project coordinator, and she handles design and social stuff, and she's done a lot of work for me. I mentioned Robin, the studio director, and Billy handling a lot of the video stuff. They are the meat and potatoes behind the guy who gets to sit in the seat and enjoy this moment. So I'm thankful to them because they're the true experts in this field who are letting a novice come in and ride along just like that. I wasn't a real cowboy. I'm not a real podcaster, but I'm going to do my best. Put me on the horse, put me behind the hot mic. I'll do my best to give you information that maybe can be helpful in your life. And I pray in my faith, not to push my faith onto you, that the opportunities in your life for your family are good also, and that they're safe. So I've got two images left to show. The first one is this. If you're not having fun, why are you doing it? There were rough days in the sheriff's office, and there were moments that broke my heart. There were also moments that, when I saw some of the sacrifice and things that men and women did, that really reinforced why the profession is so special. But I was lucky enough to ride that ride with my beautiful bride there, Veronica, and we had laughs and we had fun and we had a chance to do what was most important, stay true to ourselves and our own values. I said, I'm going to leave the man I entered, and I'd like to think that I did, although I have a lot less hair and a few grays, a little more worn and torn because of it. She's even more beautiful today than she was the day I went to the office. But we were blessed and we were privileged, and we had a lot of fun along the way. And when the heavy moments came, we dealt with them the best we could to show respect to those who were impacted by it, because I might have been the guy at the front talking about it, but it was the people behind the scenes who felt it more, and I'm thankful for them. The last shot, I hope you can enjoy. That's Bella. A lot of people who paid attention to the sheriff's office know that that's our dog, Bella. She's amazing, and she's still living her best life. She went to work with me nearly every day that I was sheriff from when she was a puppy, and it was like the last 2 years of my term. Her grandfather was a canine. One of my deputies, had a grandfather when he was a canine operator, and then he had the mom and dad and had a litter, and we took Bella. And I know there were times, I think if I went to work without Bella, the office would be like, where's Bella? If Bella went to work without me, nobody would notice. She was a fan favorite, and she still brings a lot of joy in our lives, and she's extremely protective, and we're blessed with her. So I figured, everybody likes to see a puppy dog or something like that ended on a high note. So my conclusion for you is this. Everything you do, I hope that you will pose the question of the why. What's your why in doing it? What is the purpose? Because a purpose-driven life does matter, and not a perfect life, but purpose-driven. Leading with kindness, it's a powerful thing. Living with humility is even more powerful. We have a lot of challenges in our society, but we owe it to the children and to the community to find a way to to be better and to do better, and not let things that are unique about us divide us. We're giving it too much oxygen. Political affiliations. I'm not saying your principles, you don't stray from them, but political affiliations shouldn't divide friends and family. Different faiths shouldn't divide friends and family and community. Let's just find a way to be better, to do better, and hopefully I'll bring you some topics along the way that will be helpful to you in your space. But I'll just end with a thank you. Thank you for that privilege and for this one. God bless you and have a great week.